Idiot, said Anatole. Leave off talking rubbish. If only you knew. Devil only know what this means to me. You'd really better drop it, said Dolohov. I'm speaking in earnest. It's no joking matter, this scheme of yours. Why, teasing again? Again? Go to the devil, eh? Said Anatole, frowning. Really, I'm in no humor for your stupid jokes. And he went out of the room. Dolohov smiled a contemptuous and supercilious smile when Anatole had gone. Wait a bit, he called after Anatole. I'm not joking. I'm in earnest. Come here, come here. Anatole came back into the room, and, trying to concentrate his attention, looked at Dolohov, obviously obeying him unwillingly. Listen to me. I'm speaking to you for the last time. What should I want to joke with you for? Have I ever thwarted you? Who was it arranged it all for you? Who found your priest? Who took your passport? Who got you your money? It has all been my doing. Well, and thank you for it. Do you suppose I'm not grateful? Anatole sighed and embraced Dolohov. I have helped you, but still I ought to tell you the truth. It's a dangerous business, and if you come to think of it, it's stupid. Come, you carry her off, well and good. Do you suppose they'll let it rest? It will come out that you are married. Why, they will have you up on a criminal charge, you know. Oh, nonsense, nonsense, said Anatole, frowning again. Why, didn't I explain to you, eh? And Anatole, with that peculiar partiality common in persons of dull brain, for any conclusion to which they have been led by their own mental processes, repeated the argument he had repeated 100 times over to Dolohov already. Why, I explained it. I settled that. If this marriage is invalid, he said, crooking his finger, then it follows I'm not answerable for it. Well, and if it is valid, it won't matter. No one will ever know of it abroad, so, you see, it's all right, isn't it? And don't talk to me, don't talk to me, don't talk to me. Really, you drop it. You'll get yourself into a mess. You go to the devil, said Anatole, and clutching at his hair, he went off into the next room. But at once returning, he sat with his legs up on an armchair, close to Dolohov, and facing him. Devil only knows what's the matter with me, eh? See how it beats? He took Dolohov's hand and put it on his heart. Ah, what a foot, my dear boy, what a glance! A goddess, he said in French. Huh? Dolohov, with a cold smile and a gleam in his handsome, impudent eyes, looked at him, obviously disposed to get a little more amusement out of him. Well, your money will be gone. What then? What then? Huh? Repeated Anatole, with genuine perplexity at the thought of the future. What then? I don't know what then. Come, why talk nonsense? He looked at his watch. It's time. Anatole went into the back room. Well, will you soon have done? You're dawdling there, he shouted at the servants. Dolohov put away the money, and calling a servant to give him orders about getting something to eat and drink before the journey, he went into the room where Khvostikov and Makarine were sitting. Anatole lay down on the sofa in the study, and, propped on his elbows, smiled pensively and murmured something fervently to himself. Come and have something to eat. Here, have a drink, Dolohov shouted to him from the other room. I don't want to, answered Anatole, still smiling. Come, Balaga is here. Anatole got up and went into the dining room. Balaga was a well-known driver, who had known Dolohov and Anatole for the last 6 years, and driven them in his 3-horse sledges. More than once, when Anatole's regiment had been stationed at Tver, he had driven him out of Tver in the evening, reached Moscow by dawn, and driven him back the next night. More than once he had driven Dolohov safe away when he was being pursued. Many a time he had driven them about the town with gypsies and gay ladies, as he called them. More than one horse had he ruined in driving them. More than once he had driven over people and upset vehicles in Moscow, and always his gentlemen, as he called them, had got him out of trouble. Many a time had they beaten him, many a time made him drunk with champagne and Madeira, a wine he loved. And more than one exploit he knew of each of them, which would long ago have sent any ordinary man to Siberia. They often called Balaga into their carousals, made him drink and dance with the gypsies, and many 1,000 rubles of their money had passed through his hands. In their service, 20 times a year, he risked his life and his skin, and wore out more horses than they repaid him for in money. But he liked them, liked their furious driving, 18 versts an hour, liked upsetting coachmen and running down people on foot in Moscow, and always flew full gallop along the Moscow streets. He liked to hear behind him the wild shout of drunken voices, "Get on, get on," when it was impossible to drive faster, liked to give a lash on the neck to a passing peasant who was already hastening out of his way more dead than alive. Real gentleman, he thought. Anatol and Dolokhov liked Balaga too, for his spirited driving, and because he liked the same things that they liked. With other people, Balaga drove hard bargains. He would take as much as 25 rubles for a 2 hours' drive, and rarely drove himself, generally sending one of his young men. But with his own gentlemen, as he called them, he always drove himself, and never asked for anything for the job. Only after learning through their valets when money was plentiful, he would turn up once every few months in the morning, and, sober and bowing low, would ask them to help him out of his difficulties. The gentleman always made him sit down. "Please, help me out of a scrape, Fyodor Ivanovitch, or your Excellency," he would say. "I'm quite run out of horses. Lend me what you can to go to the fair." And whenever they were flush of money, Anatol and Dolokhov would give him 1,000 or 2. Balaga was a flaxen-headed, squat, snub-nosed peasant of 7 and 20, with a red face and a particularly red, thick neck, little sparkling eyes, and a little beard. He wore a fine blue silk-lined full coat, put on over a fur pelisse. He crossed himself, facing the opposite corner, and went up to Dolokhov, holding out his black little hand. "Respects to Fyodor Ivanovitch," he said, bowing. "Good day to you, brother. Well, here he comes." "Good morning, your Excellency," he said to Anatol as he came in, and to him, too, he held out his hand. "I say, Balaga," said Anatol, laying his hands on his shoulders, "do you care for me or not, eh? Now's the time to do me good service. What sort of horses have you come with, eh?" "As the messenger bade me, your favorite beasts," said Balaga. "Come, Balaga, do you hear? You may kill all 3 of them, only get there in 3 hours, eh?" "If I kill them, how are we to get there?" said Balaga, winking. "None of your jokes now, I'll smash your face in," cried Anatol suddenly, rolling his eyes. "Jokes?" said the driver, laughing. "Do I grudge anything for my gentleman? As fast as ever the horses can gallop, we shall get there." "Ah," said Anatol. "Well, sit down." "Come, sit down," said Dolokhov. "Oh, I'll stand, Fyodor Ivanovitch." "Sit down. Nonsense. Have a drink," said Anatol, and he poured him out a big glass of Madeira. The driver's eyes sparkled at the sight of the wine. Refusing it at first for manners' sake, he tossed it off, and wiped his mouth with a red silk handkerchief that lay in his cap. "Well, and when are we to start, your Excellency?" "Oh," Anatol looked at his watch. "We must set off at once. Now mind, Balaga, eh? You'll get there in time?" "To be sure, if we've luck in getting off. Why shouldn't we do it in the time?" said Balaga. "We got you to Tver, and got there in 7 hours. You remember, I bet, your Excellency." "Do you know, I once drove from Tver at Christmas time," said Anatol, with a smile at the recollection, addressing Makarin, who was gazing admiringly at him. "Would you believe it, Makarka? One could hardly breathe, we flew so fast. We drove into a train of wagons and rode right over 2 of them, eh?" "They were horses, too," Balaga went on. "I'd put 2 young horses in the traces with the bay in the shafts." He turned to Dolokhov. "And, would you believe me, Fyodor Ivanovitch, 60 versts those beasts galloped. There was no holding them, for my hands were numb. It was a frost. I flung down the reins. "You hold them yourself, Your Excellency," said I, and I rolled up inside the sledge. No need of driving them. Why, we couldn't hold them in when we got there. In 3 hours the devils brought us. Only the left one died of it. Chapter 17. Anatole went out of the room, and a few minutes later he came back wearing a fur pelisse, girt with a silver belt, and a sable cap, jauntily stuck on one side, and very becoming to his handsome face. Looking at himself in the looking-glass, and then standing before Dolohov in the same attitude he had taken before the looking-glass, he took a glass of wine. "Well, Fedya, farewell. Thanks for everything, and farewell," said Anatole. "Come, comrades, friends." He grew pensive. "Of my youth, farewell." He turned to Macarin and the others. Although they were all going with him, Anatole evidently wanted to make a touching and solemn ceremony of this address to his comrades. He spoke in a loud, deliberate voice, squaring his chest and swinging one leg. "All take glasses. You too, Balaga. Well, lads, friends of my youth, we have had jolly sprees together, eh? Now, when shall we meet again? I'm going abroad. We've had a good time, and farewell, lads. Here's to our health. Hurrah!" he said, tossing off his glass and flinging it on the floor. "To your health," said Balaga. He, too, wiped his glass and wiped his lips with his handkerchief. Macarin embraced Anatole with tears in his eyes. "Ah, Prince, how it grieves my heart to part from you," he said. "Start, start!" shouted Anatole. Balaga was going out of the room. "No, stay," said Anatole. "Shut the door. We must sit down. Like this." They shut the door and all sat down. "Well now, quick march, lads," said Anatole, getting up. The valet, Joseph, gave Anatole his knapsack and sword, and they all went out into the vestibule. "But where's the fur cloak?" said Dolohov. "Hey, Ignatka, run into Matriona Matvyevna, and ask her for the sable cloak." "I've heard what elopements are like," said Dolohov, winking. "She'll come skipping out more dead than alive just in the things she had on indoors. The slightest delay, and then there are tears, and dear papa and dear mamma, and she's frozen in a minute and for going back again. You wrap her up in a cloak at once and carry her to the sledge." The valet brought in a woman's fox-lined pelisse. "Fool! I told you the sable. Hey, Matryoshka, the sable!" he shouted, so that his voice rang out through the rooms. A handsome, thin, and pale gypsy woman, with shining black eyes and curly black hair, with a bluish shade in it, ran out, wearing a red shawl and holding a sable cloak on her arm. "Here, I don't grudge it. Take it," she said, in visible fear of her lord, and regretful at losing the cloak. Dolohov, making her no answer, took the cloak, flung it about Matryoshka, and wrapped her up in it. "That's the way," said Dolohov. "And then this is the way," he said, and he turned the collar up round her head, leaving it only a little open before the face. "And then this is the way, do you see?" And he moved Anatole's head forward to meet the open space left by the collar, from which Matryoshka's flashing smile peeped out. "Well, good-bye, Matryosha," said Anatole, kissing her. "Ah, all my fun here is over. Give my love to Styoshka. There, good-bye. Good-bye, Matryosha. Wish me happiness." "God grant you great happiness, Prince," said Matryosha, with her gypsy accent. At the steps stood 2 3-horse sledges. 2 stalwart young drivers were holding them. Balaga took his seat in the foremost, and holding his elbows high, began deliberately arranging the reins in his hands. Anatole and Dolohov got in with him. Macarin, Khvostikov, and the valet got into the other sledge. "Ready, eh?" queried Balaga. "Off!" he shouted, twisting the reins round his hands, and the sledge flew at breakneck pace along the Nikitsky Boulevard. "Thru! Hi! Thru!" Balaga and the young driver on the box were continually shouting. In Arbatsky Square, the sledge came into collision with a carriage. There was a crash and shouts, and the sledge flew off along Arbaty. Turning twice along Podnovinsky, Balaga began to pull up, and, turning back, stopped the horses at the old equerry's crossing. A smart young driver jumped down to hold the horses by the bridle. Anatole and Dolohov walked along the pavement. On reaching the gates, Dolohov whistled. The whistle was answered, and a maidservant ran out. "Come into the courtyard, or you'll be seen. She is coming in a minute," she said. Dolohov stayed at the gate. Anatole followed the maid into the courtyard, turned a corner, and ran up the steps. He was met by Gavrilo, Marya Dmitrievna's huge groom. "Walk this way to the mistress," said the groom in his bass, blocking up the doorway. "What mistress? And who are you?" Anatole asked in a breathless whisper. "Walk in. My orders are to show you in." "Kuragin! Back!" shouted Dolohov. "Treachery! Back!" Dolohov, at the little back gate where he had stopped, was struggling with the porter, who was trying to shut the gate after Anatole as he ran in. With a desperate effort, Dolohov shoved away the porter, and, clutching at Anatole, pulled him through the gate and ran back with him to the sledge. Chapter 18. Marya Dmitrievna, coming upon Sonia weeping in the corridor, had forced her to confess everything. Snatching up Natasha's letter and reading it, Marya Dmitrievna went into Natasha with the letter in her hand. "Vile girl! Shameless hussy!" she said to her. "I won't hear a word." Pushing aside Natasha, who gazed at her with amazed but tearless eyes, she locked her into the room, and giving orders to her gate porter to admit the persons who would be coming that evening, but not to allow them to pass out again, and giving her grooms orders to show those persons up to her, she seated herself in the drawing-room, awaiting the abductors. When Gavrilo came to announce to Marya Dmitrievna that the persons who had come had run away, she got up frowning, and, clasping her hands behind her, walked a long while up and down through her rooms, pondering what she was to do. At midnight she walked towards Natasha's room, feeling the key in her pocket. Sonia was sitting sobbing in the corridor. "Marya Dmitrievna, do, for God's sake, let me go into her," she said. Marya Dmitrievna, making her no reply, opened the door and went in. "Hateful, disgusting, in my house, the nasty hussy. Only I'm sorry for her father," Marya Dmitrievna was thinking, trying to allay her wrath. "Hard as it may be, I will forbid anyone to speak of it, and will conceal it from the Count." Marya Dmitrievna walked with resolute steps into the room. Natasha was lying on the sofa. She had her head hidden in her hands and did not stir. She was lying in exactly the same position in which Marya Dmitrievna had left her. "You're a nice girl, a very nice girl," said Marya Dmitrievna, "encouraging meetings with lovers in my house. There's no use in humbugging. You listen when I speak to you." Marya Dmitrievna touched her on the arm. "You listen when I speak. You've disgraced yourself like the lowest wench. I don't know what I couldn't do to you, but I feel for your father. I will hide it from him." Natasha did not change her position, only her whole body began to writhe with noiseless, convulsive sobs, which choked her. Marya Dmitrievna looked round at Sonia, and sat down on the edge of the sofa beside Natasha. "It's lucky for him that he escaped me, but I'll get hold of him," she said in her coarse voice. "Do you hear what I say, eh?" She put her big hand under Natasha's face and turned it towards her. Both Marya Dmitrievna and Sonia were surprised when they saw Natasha's face. Her eyes were glittering and dry, her lips tightly compressed. Her cheeks looked sunken. "Let me be. What do I shall die," she articulated with angry effort, tore herself away from Marya Dmitrievna, and fell back into the same attitude again. "Natalia," said Marya Dmitrievna, "I wish for your good. Lie still. Come, lie still like that, then. I won't touch you, and listen. I'm not going to tell you how wrongly you have acted. You know that yourself. But now your father's coming back tomorrow. What am I to tell him, huh? Again Natasha's body heaved with sobs. Well, he will hear of it. Your brother, your betrothed. I have no betrothed. I have refused him, cried Natasha. That makes no difference, pursued Marya Dmitrievna. Well, they hear of it. Do you suppose they will let the matter rest? Suppose he, your father, I know him, if he challenges him to a duel, will that be all right, huh? Oh, let me be. Why did you hinder everything? Why? Why? Who asked you to? Cried Natasha, getting up from the sofa and looking vindictively at Marya Dmitrievna. But what was it you wanted? Screamed Marya Dmitrievna, getting hot again. Why, you weren't shut up, were you? Who hindered his coming to the house? Why carry you off like some gypsy wench? If he had carried you off, do you suppose they wouldn't have caught him? Your father, or brother, or betrothed? He's a wretch, a scoundrel, that's what he is. He's better than any of you, cried Natasha, getting up. If you hadn't meddled... Oh, my God, what does it mean? Sonia, why did you? Go away. And she sobbed with a despair with which people only bewail a trouble they feel that they have brought on themselves. Marya Dmitrievna was beginning to speak again, but Natasha cried, Go away! Go away! You all hate me and despise me! And she flung herself again on the sofa. Marya Dmitrievna went on for some time longer, lecturing Natasha, and urging on her that it must all be kept from the Count, that no one would know anything of it if Natasha would only undertake to forget it all, and not to show a sign to anyone of anything having happened. Natasha made no answer. She did not sob any more, but she was taken with shivering fits and trembling. Marya Dmitrievna put a pillow under her head, lay 2 quilts over her, and brought her some lime-flower water with her own hands, but Natasha made no response when she spoke to her. Well, let her sleep, said Marya Dmitrievna, as she went out of the room, supposing her to be asleep. But Natasha was not asleep. Her wide-open eyes gazed straight before her out of her pale face. All that night Natasha did not sleep, and did not weep, and said not a word to Sonia, who got up several times and went in to her. Next day, at lunch-time, as he had promised, Count Ilya Andreich arrived from his estate in the environs. He was in very good spirits. He had come to terms with the purchaser, and there was nothing now to detain him in Moscow away from his countess, for whom he was pining. Marya Dmitrievna met him, and told him that Natasha had been very unwell on the previous day, that they had sent for a doctor, and that now she was better. Natasha did not leave her room that morning. With tightly shut, parched lips, and dry, staring eyes, she sat at the window, uneasily watching the passers-by along the street, and hurriedly looking round at anyone who entered her room. She was obviously expecting news of him, expecting that he would come himself or would write to her. When the Count went into her, she turned uneasily at the sound of his manly tread, and her face resumed its previous cold and even vindictive expression. She did not even get up to meet him. "What is it, my angel? Are you ill?" asked the Count. Natasha was silent a moment. "Yes, I am ill," she answered. In answer to the Count's inquiries why she was depressed, and whether anything had happened with her betrothed, she assured him that nothing had, and begged him not to be uneasy. Marya Dmitrievna confirmed Natasha's assurances that nothing had happened. From the pretense of illness, from his daughter's agitated state, and the troubled faces of Sonia and Marya Dmitrievna, the Count saw clearly that something had happened in his absence. But it was so terrible to him to believe that anything disgraceful had happened to his beloved daughter, and he so prized his own cheerful serenity, that he avoided inquiries and tried to assure himself that it was nothing very out of the way, and only grieved that her indisposition would delay their return to the country. Chapter 19. From the day of his wife's arrival in Moscow, Pierre had been intending to go away somewhere else, simply not to be with her. soon after the Rostovs' arrival in Moscow, the impression made upon him by Natasha had impelled him to hasten in carrying out his intention. He went to Tver to see the widow of Osip Alexievich, who had long before promised to give him papers of the deceased's. When Pierre came back to Moscow, he was handed a letter from Maria Dmitrievna, who summoned him to her on a matter of great importance concerning Andrei Bolkonsky and his betrothed. Pierre had been avoiding Natasha. It seemed to him that he had for her a feeling stronger than a married man should have for a girl betrothed to his friend, and some fate was continually throwing him into her company. What has happened? And what do they want with me? He thought, as he dressed to go to Maria Dmitrievna's. If only Prince Andrei would make haste home and marry her, thought Pierre on the way to the house. In the Tverskoy boulevard, someone shouted his name. "Pierre, been back long?" A familiar voice called to him. Pierre raised his head. Anatole, with his everlasting companion Makarin, dashed by in a sledge with a pair of grey trotting horses, who were kicking up the snow onto the forepart of the sledge. Anatole was sitting in the classic pose of military dandies, the lower part of his face muffled in his beaver collar, and his head bent a little forward. His face was fresh and rosy. His hat, with its white plume, was stuck on one side, showing his curled, pomaded hair, sprinkled with fine snow. Indeed, he is the real philosopher, thought Pierre. He sees nothing beyond the present moment of pleasure. Nothing worries him, and so he is always cheerful, satisfied, and serene. What I would not give to be just like him, Pierre mused with envy. In Maria Dmitrievna's entrance hall, the footman, as he took off Pierre's fur coat, told him that his mistress begged him to come to her in her bedroom. As he opened the door into the reception-room, Pierre caught sight of Natasha, sitting at the window with a thin, pale, and ill-tempered face. She looked round at him, frowned, and with an expression of frigid dignity walked out of the room. "What has happened?" asked Pierre, going in to Maria Dmitrievna. "Fine doings," answered Maria Dmitrievna. 58 years I have lived in the world. Never have I seen anything so disgraceful." And exacting from Pierre his word of honor not to say a word about all he was to hear, Maria Dmitrievna informed him that Natasha had broken off her engagement without the knowledge of her parents, that the cause of her doing so was Anatole Kuragin, with whom Pierre's wife had thrown her, and with whom Natasha had attempted to elope in her father's absence in order to be secretly married to him. Pierre, with hunched shoulders and open mouth, listened to what Maria Dmitrievna was saying, hardly able to believe his ears. That Prince Andrei's fiancée, so passionately loved by him, Natasha Rostov, hitherto so charming, should give up Bolkonsky for that fool Anatole, who was married already, Pierre knew the secret of his marriage, and be so much in love with him as to consent to elope with him, that Pierre could not conceive and could not comprehend. He could not reconcile the sweet impression he had in his soul of Natasha, whom he had known from childhood, with this new conception of her baseness, folly, and cruelty. He thought of his wife. "They are all alike," he said to himself, reflecting he was not the only man whose unhappy fate it was to be bound to a low woman. But still he felt ready to weep with sorrow for Prince Andrei, with sorrow for his pride, and the more he felt for his friend, the greater was the contempt and even aversion with which he thought of Natasha, who had just passed him with such an expression of rigid dignity. He could not know that Natasha's heart was filled with despair, shame, and humiliation, and that it was not her fault that her face accidentally expressed dignity and severity. "What? Get married?" cried Pierre at Maria Dmitrievna's words. "He can't get married. He is married." "Worse and worse," said Maria Dmitrievna. "He's a nice youth, a perfect scoundrel, and she's expecting him. She's been expecting him these 2 days. We must tell her. At least she will leave off expecting him." After learning from Pierre the details of Anatole's marriage, and pouring out her wrath against him in abusive epithets, Maria Dmitrievna informed Pierre of her object in sending for him. Maria Dmitrievna was afraid that the Count or Bolkonsky, who might arrive any moment, might hear of the affair, though she intended to conceal it from them, and might challenge Kuragin, and she therefore begged Pierre to bid his brother-in-law from her to leave Moscow and not to dare show himself in her presence. Pierre promised to do as she desired him, only then grasping the danger menacing the old Count and Nikolai and Prince Andrei. After briefly and precisely explaining to him her wishes, she let him go to the drawing-room. "Mind, the Count knows nothing of it. You behave as though you know nothing," she said to him, "and I'll go and tell her it's no use for her to expect him. And stay to dinner, if you care to," Maria Dmitrievna called after Pierre. Pierre met the old Count. He seemed upset and anxious. That morning Natasha had told him that she had broken off her engagement to Bolkonsky. "I'm in trouble, my dear fellow," he said to Pierre, "with those girls without the mother. I do regret now that I came. I will be open with you. Have you heard she has broken off her engagement without a word to anyone? I never did, I'll admit, feel very much pleased at the marriage. He's an excellent man, of course, but still there could be no happiness against a father's will, and Natasha will never want for suitors. Still, it had been going on so long, and then such a step, without her father's or her mother's knowledge. And now she's ill, and God knows what it is. It's a bad thing, Count, a bad thing to have a daughter away from her mother." Pierre saw the Count was greatly troubled, and tried to change the conversation to some other subject, but the Count went back again to his troubles. Sonia came into the drawing-room with an agitated face. "Natasha is not very well. She is in her room and would like to see you. Maria Dmitrievna is with her, and she asks you to come too." "Ah, yes, why, you're such a great friend of Bolkonsky's. No doubt she wants to send him some message," said the Count. "Ah, my God, how happy it all was!" And clutching at his sparse locks, the Count went out of the room. Maria Dmitrievna had told Natasha that Anatole was married. Natasha would not believe her, and insisted on the statement being confirmed by Pierre himself. Sonia told Pierre this as she led him across the corridor to Natasha's room. Natasha, pale and stern, was sitting beside Maria Dmitrievna, and she met Pierre at the door with eyes of feverish brilliance and inquiry. She did not smile nor nod to him. She simply looked hard at him, and that look asked him simply, was he a friend or an enemy like the rest, as regards Anatole? Pierre in himself had evidently no existence for her. "He knows everything," said Maria Dmitrievna, addressing Natasha. "Let him tell you whether I have spoken the truth." As a hunted, wounded beast looks at the approaching dogs and hunters, Natasha looked from one to the other. "Natalia Ilyinichna," Pierre began, dropping his eyes, and conscious of a feeling of pity for her, and loathing for the operation he had to perform. "Whether it is true or not cannot affect you, since—" "Then it is not true that he is married?" "No, it is true." "Has he been married long?" she asked. "On your word of honor?" Pierre told her so on his word of honor. "Is he still here?" she asked rapidly. "Yes, I have just seen him." She was obviously incapable of speaking. She made a sign with her hands for them to leave her alone. Chapter 20. Pierre did not stay to dinner, but went away at once on leaving Natasha's room. He drove about the town looking for Anatole Kuragin, at the very thought of whom the blood rushed to his heart, and he felt a difficulty in breathing. On the ice hills, at the gypsies, at Somoneno, he was not to be found. Pierre drove to the club. In the club, everything was going on just as usual. The members who had come in to dinner were sitting in groups. They greeted Pierre and talked of the news of the town. The footman, after greeting him, told him, as he knew his friends and his habits, that there was a place left for him in the little dining-room, that Prince Mikhail Zakharitch was in the library, and that Pavel Timofeitch had not come in yet. One of Pierre's acquaintances asked him in the middle of a conversation about the weather whether he had heard of Kuragin's elopement with Natalie Rostov, of which everyone was talking in the town. Was it true? Pierre said, laughing, that it was all nonsense, for he had just come from the Rostovs. He asked everyone about Anatole. One man told him he had not come in yet. Another said he was to dine there that day. It was strange to Pierre to look at the calm, indifferent crowd of people who knew nothing of what was passing in his soul. He walked about the hall, waited till everyone had come in, and still seeing nothing of Anatole, he did not dine, but drove home. Anatole was dining that day with Dolohov, and consulting with him how to achieve the exploit that had miscarried. It seemed to him essential to see Natasha. In the evening he went to his sister's, to discuss with her means for arranging their meeting. When Pierre, after vainly driving about all Moscow, returned home, his valet told him that Prince Anatole Vassilievich was with the Countess. The drawing-room of the Countess was full of guests. Pierre did not bestow a greeting on his wife, whom he had not seen since his return. She was more hateful to him than ever at that moment. He walked into the drawing-room, and seeing Anatole, went straight up to him. "Ah, Pierre," said the Countess, going up to her husband, "you don't know what a plight our poor Anatole is in." She stopped short, seeing in her husband's bowed head, in his glittering eyes, in his resolute tread, that terrible look of rage and power, which she knew and had experienced in her own case after the duel with Dolohov. "Wherever you are, there is vice and wickedness," said Pierre to his wife. "Anatole, come along. I want a word with you," he said in French. Anatole looked round at his sister, and got up obediently, prepared to follow Pierre. Pierre took him by the arm, drew him to him, and walked out of the room. "If you allow yourself in my drawing-room," Ellen whispered, but Pierre walked out of the room without answering her. Anatole followed him, with his usual jaunty swagger, but his face betrayed uneasiness. Going into his own room, Pierre shut the door, and addressed Anatole without looking at him. "Did you promise Countess Rostov to marry her? Did you try to elope with her?" "My dear fellow," answered Anatole in French, as was the whole conversation, "I don't consider myself bound to answer questions put to me in that tone." Pierre's face, which had been pale before, was distorted by fury. With his big hand he clutched Anatole by the collar of his uniform, and proceeded to shake him from side to side, till Anatole's face showed a sufficient degree of terror. "When I say I want a word with you," Pierre repeated. "Well, what? This is stupid, eh?" said Anatole, feeling a button of his collar that had been torn off with the cloth. "You're a scoundrel and a blackguard, and I don't know what prevents me from permitting myself the pleasure of braining you with this. See?" said Pierre, expressing himself so artificially because he was speaking French. He took up a heavy paperweight and lifted it in a menacing way, but at once hurriedly put it down in its place. "Did you promise to marry her?" I didn't think. I never promised, though, because—" Pierre interrupted him. "Have you any of her letters?" "Have you any letters?" Pierre repeated, advancing upon Anatole. Anatole glanced at him, and at once thrust his hand in his pocket, and took out a pocket-book. Pierre took the letter he gave him, and pushing away a table that stood in the way, he plumped down on the sofa. "I won't be violent. Don't be afraid," said Pierre, in response to a gesture of alarm from Anatole. "Letters 1, said Pierre, as though repeating a lesson to himself. 2. After a moment's silence he went on, getting up again and beginning to walk about. "Tomorrow you are to leave Moscow." "But how can I?" 3. Pierre went on, not heeding him. "You are never to say a word of what has passed between you and the young Countess." That I know I can't prevent your doing. But if you have a spark of conscience—" Pierre walked several times up and down the room. Anatole sat at the table, scowling and biting his lips. "You surely must understand that apart from your own pleasure, there's the happiness, the peace of other people. That you are ruining a whole life simply because you want to amuse yourself. Amuse yourself with women like my wife. With them you're within your rights. They know what it is you want of them. They are armed against you by the same experience of vice. But to promise a girl to marry her, to deceive, to steal— surely you must see that it's as base as attacking an old man or a child." Pierre paused and glanced at Anatole, more with inquiry now than with wrath. "I don't know about that." "Huh?" said Anatole, growing bolder as Pierre gained control over his rage. "I don't know about that, and I don't want to," he said, looking away from Pierre and speaking with a slight quiver of his lower jaw. "But you have said words to me, base and all that sort of thing, which, as a man of honor, I can't allow anyone to do." Pierre looked at him in amazement, not able to understand what it was he wanted. "Though it has been only tete-a-tete," Anatole went on, "still I can't—" "What? Do you want satisfaction?" said Pierre sarcastically. "At any rate, you might take back your words. Huh? If you want me to do as you wish. Eh?" "I'll take them back. I'll take them back," said Pierre, "and beg you to forgive me." Pierre could not help glancing at the loose button. "And here's money, too, if you want some for your journey." Anatole smiled. The expression of that base and cringing smile that he knew so well in his wife infuriated Pierre. "Oh, you vile, heartless tribe!" he cried, and walked out of the room. Next day Anatole left for Petersburg. Chapter 21. Pierre drove to Marya Dmitrievna's to report to her the execution of her commands as to Kuragin's banishment from Moscow. The whole house was in excitement and alarm. Natasha was very ill, and as Marya Dmitrievna told him in secret, she had, on the night after she had been told Anatole was married, taken arsenic, which she had procured by stealth. After swallowing a little, she had been so frightened that she waked Sonia and told her what she had done. Antidotes had been given in time, and now she was out of danger, but she was still so weak that they could not dream of moving her to the country, and the countess had been sent for. Pierre saw the count in great trouble, and Sonia in tears, but he could not see Natasha. That day Pierre dined at the club, and heard on every side gossip about the attempted abduction of the young Countess Rostov, and persistently denied the story, assuring everyone that the only foundation for it was that his brother-in-law had made the young lady an offer and had been refused. It seemed to Pierre that it was part of his duty to conceal the whole affair, and to save the young countess's reputation. He was looking forward with terror to Prince Andrei's return, and drove round every day to ask for news of him from the old prince. Prince Nikolai Andreitch heard all the rumors current in the town through Mademoiselle Bourienne, and he had read the note to Princess Maria, in which Natasha had broken off her engagement. He seemed in better spirits than usual, and looked forward with impatience to seeing his son. A few days after Anatole's departure, Pierre received a note from Prince Andrei to inform him that he had arrived, and to beg him to go and see him. The first minute of Prince Andrei's arrival in Moscow, he was handed by his father Natasha's note to Princess Maria, in which she broke off her engagement. The note had been stolen from Princess Maria and given to the old prince by Mademoiselle Bourienne. He heard from his father's lips the story of Natasha's elopement, with additions. Prince Andrei had arrived in the evening. Pierre came to see him the following morning. Pierre had expected to find Prince Andrei almost in the same state as Natasha, and he was therefore surprised when, as he entered the drawing-room, he heard the sound of Prince Andrei's voice in the study, loudly and eagerly discussing some Petersburg intrigue. Pierre had expected to find Prince Andrei almost in the same state as Natasha, and he was therefore surprised when, as he entered the drawing-room, he heard the sound of Prince Andrei's voice in the study, loudly and eagerly discussing some Petersburg intrigue. The old prince and some other voice interrupted him from time to time. Princess Maria came out to meet Pierre. She sighed, turning her eyes towards the door of the room where Prince Andrei was, plainly intending to express her sympathy with his sorrow. But Pierre saw by Princess Maria's face that she was glad both at what had happened and at the way her brother had taken the news of his fiancée's treachery. "He said he had expected it," she said. "I know his pride will not allow him to express his feelings, but anyway, he has borne it better, far better, than I had expected. It seems it was to be so." "But is it all really at an end?" said Pierre. Princess Maria looked at him with surprise. She could not understand how one could ask such a question. Pierre went into the study. Prince Andrei was very much changed, and visibly much more robust, but there was a new horizontal line between his brows. He was in civilian dress, and standing facing his father and Prince Meshchersky, he was hotly arguing, making vigorous gesticulations. The subject was Speransky, of whose sudden dismissal and supposed treason news had just reached Moscow. Now he, Speransky, will be criticized and condemned by all who were enthusiastic about him a month ago, Prince Andrei was saying, and were incapable of understanding his aims. It's very easy to condemn a man when he's out of favor, and to throw upon him the blame of all the mistakes of other people. But I maintain that if anything of value has been done in the present reign, it has been done by him alone. He stopped, seeing Pierre. His face quivered, and at once assumed a vindictive expression. "And posterity will do him justice," he finished, and at once turned to Pierre. "Well, how are you? Still getting stouter?" he said eagerly, but the new line was still more deeply furrowed on his forehead. "Yes, I'm very well," he answered to Pierre's question, and he smiled. It was clear to Pierre that his smile meant, "I am well, but my health is of no use to anyone now." After saying a few words to Pierre of the awful road from the frontiers of Poland, of people he had met in Switzerland who knew Pierre, and of Monsieur de Sales, whom he had brought back from Switzerland as a tutor for his son, Prince Andrei warmly took part again in the conversation about Speransky, which had been kept up between the two old gentlemen. If there had been treason, and there were proofs of his secret relations with Napoleon, they wouldn't have made them public, he said, with heat and haste. I don't and I didn't like Speransky personally, but I do like justice. Pierre recognized now in his friend that desire he knew only too well, for excitement and discussion of something apart from himself, simply in order to stifle thoughts that were too painful and too near his heart. When Prince Meshchersky had gone, Prince Andrei took Pierre's arm and asked him to come to the room that had been assigned him. In that room there was a folding bedstead and open trunks and boxes. Prince Andrei went up to one of them and took out a case. Out of the case he took a packet of letters. He did all this in silence and very rapidly. He stood up again and cleared his throat. His face was frowning and his lips set. "Forgive me if I'm troubling you." Pierre saw that Prince Andrei was going to speak of Natasha, and his broad face showed sympathy and pity. That expression on Pierre's face exasperated Prince Andrei. He went on resolutely, clearly, and disagreeably. "I have received a refusal from Countess Rostov, and rumors have reached me of your brother-in-law's seeking her hand, or something of the kind. Is that true?" "Both true and untrue," began Pierre, but Prince Andrei cut him short. "Here are her letters and her portrait," he said. He took the packet from the table and gave it to Pierre. "Give that to the Countess, if you will see her." "She is very ill," said Pierre. "So she's still here," said Prince Andrei. "And Prince Kuragin?" he asked quickly. "He has been gone a long while." "She has been at death's door." "I am very sorry to hear of her illness," said Prince Andrei. He laughed a cold, malignant, unpleasant laugh like his father's. "But Monsieur Kuragin, then, did not deign to bestow his hand on Countess Rostov?" said Prince Andrei. He snorted several times. "He could not have married her, because he is married," said Pierre. Prince Andrei laughed unpleasantly, again recalling his father. "And where is he now, your brother-in-law, may I ask?" he said. "He went to Peter—" "But really, I don't know," said Pierre. "Well, that's no matter," said Prince Andrei. "Tell Countess Rostov from me that she was and is perfectly free, and that I wish her all prosperity." Pierre took the packet. Prince Andrei, as though reflecting whether he had not something more to say, or waiting for Pierre to say something, looked at him with a fixed gaze. "Listen. Do you remember our discussion in Petersburg?" said Pierre. "Do you remember about—" "I remember," Prince Andrei answered hurriedly. "I said that a fallen woman should be forgiven, but I did not say I could forgive one. I can't." "How can you compare it?" said Pierre. Prince Andrei cut him short. He cried harshly, "Yes, ask her hand again, be magnanimous, and all that sort of thing? Oh, that's all very noble, but I'm not equal to following in that gentleman's tracks. If you care to remain my friend, never speak to me of that, of all this business. Well, goodbye. So you'll give that?" Pierre left him, and went in to the old prince and Princess Maria. The old man seemed livelier than usual. Princess Maria was the same as usual, but behind her sympathy for her brother, Pierre detected her relief that her brother's marriage was broken off. Looking at them, Pierre felt what a contempt and dislike they all had for the Rostovs, felt that it would be impossible in their presence even to mention the name of the girl, who could give up Prince Andrei for anyone in the world. At dinner they talked of the coming war, of which there could be now no doubt in the near future. Prince Andrei talked incessantly and argued first with his father, and then with de Sales, the Swiss tutor. He seemed more eager than usual, with that eagerness of which Pierre knew so well the inner cause. Chapter 22. That evening, Pierre went to the Rostovs to fulfill Prince Andrei's commission. Natasha was in bed, the Count was at the club, and Pierre, after giving the letters to Sonia, went in to see Maria Dmitrievna, who was interested to know how Prince Andrei had taken the news. 10 minutes later, Sonia came in to Maria Dmitrievna. "Natasha insists on seeing Count Pyotr Kirillich," she said. "Why? Are we to take her up to her, eh? Why, you are all in a muddle there," said Maria Dmitrievna. "No, she has dressed and gone into the drawing-room," said Sonia. Maria Dmitrievna could only shrug her shoulders. "When will the Countess come? She has quite worn me out. You mind now, don't tell her everything," she said to Pierre. "One hasn't the heart to scold her. She's so piteous, poor thing." Natasha was standing in the middle of the drawing-room, looking thinner, and with a pale, set face, not at all overcome with shame as Pierre had expected to see her. When Pierre appeared in the doorway, she made a hurried movement, evidently in uncertainty whether to go to meet him or to wait for him to come to her. Pierre went hurriedly towards her. He thought she would give him her hand as usual, but coming near him, she stopped, breathing hard, and letting her hands hang lifelessly, exactly in the same pose in which she used to stand in the middle of the room to sing, but with an utterly different expression. "Pyotr Kirillich," she began, speaking quickly, "Prince Bolkonsky was your friend. He is your friend," she corrected herself. It seemed to her that everything was in the past, and now all was changed. "He told me to apply to you." Pierre choked dumbly as he looked at her. Till then, he had in his heart blamed her and tried to despise her, but now he felt so sorry for her that there was no room in his heart for blame. "He is here now. Tell him to forgive me." She stopped short and breathed even more quickly, but she did not weep. "Yes, I will tell him," said Pierre. But he did not know what to say. Natasha was evidently dismayed at the idea that might have occurred to Pierre. "No, I know that everything is over," she said hurriedly. "No, that can never be. I'm only wretched at the wrong I have done him. Only tell him that I beg him to forgive me for everything." Her whole body was heaving. She sat down on a chair. A feeling of pity he had never known before flooded Pierre's heart. I will tell him everything once more," said Pierre. "But I should like to know one thing." "To know what?" Natasha's eyes asked. "I should like to know, did you love—" Pierre did not know what to call Anatole, and flushed at the thought of him. "Did you love that bad man?" "Don't call him bad," said Natasha. "But I don't know." She began crying again, and Pierre was more than ever overwhelmed with pity, tenderness, and love. He felt the tears trickling under his spectacles, and hoped they would not be noticed. "We won't talk any more of it, my dear," he said. It seemed suddenly so strange to Natasha to hear the gentle, tender, sympathetic voice in which he spoke. "We won't talk of it, my dear. I'll tell him everything. But one thing I beg you. Look on me as your friend. And if you want help, advice, or simply want to open your heart to someone, not now, but when things are clearer in your heart, think of me." He took her hand and kissed it. "I shall be happy if I am able—" Pierre was confused. "Don't speak to me like that. I'm not worth it," cried Natasha, and she would have left the room, but Pierre held her hand. He knew there was something more he must say to her, but when he said it, he was surprised at his own words. "Hush, hush. Your whole life lies before you," he said to her. "Before me? No. All is over for me," she said with shame and self-humiliation. "All over?" he repeated. "If I were not myself, but the handsomest, cleverest, best man in the world, and if I were free, I would be on my knees this minute to beg for your hand and your love." For the first time for many days, Natasha wept with tears of gratitude and softened feeling, and glancing at Pierre, she went out of the room. Pierre followed her, almost running into the vestibule, and restraining the tears of tenderness and happiness that made a lump in his throat. He flung on his fur coat, unable to find the armholes, and got into his sledge. "Now where, Your Excellency?" asked the coachman. "Where?" Pierre asked himself. "Where can I go now? Not to the club or to pay calls." All men seemed to him so pitiful, so poor in comparison with the feeling of tenderness and love in his heart, in comparison with that softened, grateful glance she had turned upon him that last minute through her tears. "Home," said Pierre, throwing open the bearskin coat over his broad, joyously breathing chest, in spite of 10 degrees of frost. It was clear and frosty. Over the dirty, half-dark streets, over the black roofs, was a dark, starlit sky. It was only looking at the sky that Pierre forgot the mortifying meanness of all things earthly, in comparison with the height his soul had risen to. As he drove into Arbatsky Square, the immense expanse of dark, starlit sky lay open before Pierre's eyes. Almost in the center of it, above the Prechetensky Boulevard, surrounded on all sides by stars, but distinguished from all by its nearness to the earth, its white light and long upturned tail, shone the huge, brilliant comet of 1812, the comet which betokened, it was said, all manner of horrors and the end of the world. But in Pierre's heart that bright comet, with its long luminous tail, aroused no feeling of dread. On the contrary, his eyes wet with tears, Pierre looked joyously at this bright comet, which seemed as though after flying with inconceivable swiftness through infinite space in a parabola, had suddenly, like an arrow piercing the earth, stuck fast at one chosen spot in the black sky, and stayed there, vigorously tossing up its tail, shining and playing with its white light among the countless other twinkling stars. It seemed to Pierre that it was in full harmony with what was in his softened and emboldened heart that had gained vigor to blossom into a new life. This concludes the reading of War and Peace, Book 2, by Leo Tolstoy. This book was read by Walter Zimmerman.